Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Gittin daf Lamed Vav. We are going to begin on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, about 8 lines from the top by the 2 dots. The Mishnah told us that Eidim Chaismin al Get Mimnei Tikkun Olam, that it's necessary for the witnesses to sign on the actual get, and the reason for this is because of Tikkun Olam. So on this, the Gemara wonders, Mimnei Tikkun Olam Deraisahu. Tikkun Olam sounds like it's a rabbinical enactment, but the truth is, this is something in which is really a din deraisa. The pasuk says, "V'kasab sefer v'chaslein." It says beferish in Sefer Yirmiyah that you're supposed to write it down in a book and sign it. So we see signatures are deraisa. So Amar Rabbi Lotzricha Rabbi Lezer Dera Eda Masira Karti. This is in accordance. This is going to be question 3 as well as TB5. Which asks, Mahu Tikkun Olam, what's that? So this is in accordance to the Shita of Rabbi Lezer. As we've stated many times, but also Rashi brings down, it says in Perek Basra, the end of this Masechta, that Eidim Masira Karti, that he says that the Eidim signing is not deraisa. That's not the requirement. The important Lishma aspect, as we've seen elsewhere, is that they have to write it Lishma. However, when it comes to them actually witnessing it, that is the key element. Says Rashi, Eidim kosher, this pasuk is just giving you good advice. You should have someone sign it, but you don't actually have to. So on this, the Gemara continues and says, so according to him, there's no actual requirement to sign. It's not deraisa. Therefore, Tikkun Rabbanan Chasima, but nonetheless, he said for Tikkun Olam, which we saw previously, that language, which is taken from here, the din is that you should have witnesses sign. Why? What is the Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Rabbanan Chasima Tikkun Olam. The Zimnin Demaisi Sahadi. What happens if those Eidim Masira die, which is a reality? Or let's say they've traveled abroad. So therefore, in that situation, it's better that we should instead have witnesses that have signed it, and therefore those signatures will be verified, and therefore by that alone, we'll say that it's a good get. Because otherwise, if it's just Eidim Masira, if there's any issues and they're not around, then we're not going to be able to figure out how to rectify this issue. That's answer number 1. If Yosem or Meir. Now, Rameir does say that signing Eidi Chasima Karti is apparently din deraisa. So what's the Tikkun Olam? So Eskinu Shehi Eidim Afarshim Shemaisein Begittin Memnei Tikkun Olam. So interestingly enough, even though it was necessary to sign a document, it wasn't necessary to actually sign your name. Kedesanya. Rishayin originally Hayikosav Ani Ploini Chasamti Aid. All they do is say I. To write the word Ani, I am signing as a witness. But he didn't actually write his actual name. He only wrote Ani. So they need to therefore match up previous handwriting that was verified and based in from before. So because of that, the imkasav yada yitzis b'makam acher kosher. It's only if they're able to match the signature, the handwriting, which could be quite challenging, the imla apostle. So because of that challenge, that's the reason why they made this takana. Omar Rabbi Gamliel takana gadol hiskinu shehu mefarshim shemaisem. They should actually write down their full names. Begittin memnei tikkun olam. So therefore, again, if there's any issue, it's much easier to know the people because it actually has their names on the get, as opposed to the word ani, and then you have to figure out, oh, this is his signature, that's his signature, and you have to compare this person's signature to someone else, to the signature from before. That takes much more expertise and it could be very difficult, and there's a good chance you may not be able to match them up. So therefore, the midiraisa, you do have to sign it, but you only have to write as ani. And the takana is to actually write your name. So you're telling me that a siman without writing your name is not sufficient? But Rav Tzair Kavara, as we saw this elsewhere, he used to actually make a picture of a fish. That was his signature. Rav Chanina Tzair Charusa. He didn't sign his name. Instead, he made a picture of a branch of a tree. Rav Chisda Samach. He wrote was the letter Samach. Rav Hoshia Ayin. He wrote the letter Ayin. Rabba Barav Huna Tsayer Makusa. He actually made a picture of the mast of a ship. The question is why these particular things is an interesting thing to think about. But the question is, we see even a simon alone is enough. Whereas says, yeah, but it's only for those people. Kashana Rabbanan to begin simunayu. Because these are Rabbanan, there was expertise in their simon. So miikar b'mai afkinhu. So if that's the case, so originally, how did it work? Bediske, with general correspondence. They were able to look at their general correspondence and be able to make an understanding of everything. Says Rashi, Bameh hoidiu labriyos she'elu chaismehen b'shtaros. How, when it comes to these Rabbanan, will they be able to understand their signatures? Leko me'mer kara da amrit hiskinu. And so it was only instituted. So what happened before? The Bediskra, Shtar Shelos Chuvas Shlemus. So when they wrote different correspondence, questions and answers and the like, that's how they were able to match up their words to these signatures. Okay. And then the Mishnah says the Hillel Hiskin Pruzbol V'chulu, the famous Pruzbol. Now we're going to understand exactly what was instituted and what is the Pruzbol. So Tanan Hasan. Prozbol in a Meshamit. So normally when it comes to Shemitah, it's Meshamit. It stops the loans. However, if you wrote a Prozbol, then no longer is the Shemitah which comes, it will not be Meshamit, which means that the Shemitah's Ksafin, typically the loans that get canceled on the 7th year, will not take place if a Prozbol was written. This is one of the things that Hill did. It was a big problem. People stopped lending money to one another. The overall mashakasa and because people stopped lending and helping other people out, it was a violation of the pasuk of Hishamucha Penya Devar Imbo Babcha Numababcha Blial. The pasuk tells us that a person should not withhold giving out loans, and that's what was happening. So people were violating the system of Torah, so he wanted more loans to take place. So Amad the Hiskin Pruzbol, the Zehu Gufa Shel Pruzbol. So what exactly does a Pruzbol? What does it say on it? For example, it's something along these lines, or exactly like these lines. Mosrani Lechem Ploini, that I submit Ploini Dayanim Shubamachim Ploini. So I'm basically submitting myself to the Beis Din. It's not a private loan, but now I'm connecting it to Beis Din. Shechol chayv sheyesh le'etzel Ploni, that any debt that I have toward Ploni, shagvenu kol zman sheyirtza, it can be collected any time that is wanted. Hadayanim chayisim l'mata, and then the judges themselves sign on the bottom. O ha'edim, fine. And that's what they would do. They would have these this particular document, and because of that, even though the Torah says the loan stops, however, this institution works. So on this, the Gemara asks the obvious question: how could you make such a takana? The Torah itself says there's a concept of shmitas ksaf, that the loans get canceled. So then all of a sudden, Hill's coming along and canceling a din Torah. How's that possible? How do we understand how Hill was able to do such a thing? How can he remove and make a takana against a violation of the Torah itself? Okay, fine. People are violating the pasuk, but still there's a din Torah of shmitas ksafim. So how could he step in and do such a thing? It's very hard to understand. So Gemara has two answers. This is actually going to be 2a4. Eich tikin Hillel pruzbol hari midaraisa mishamet. Ve'ech rabbanan akru din deraisa. So Omer Bai b'shvius mizman hazeh. You're right. We're not talking about Shemitah in the time of the Beis Hamikdash when it was a din deraisa. Shemitah nowadays, according to this sheet we're going to see, is actually a din derabbanan. Says Rashi, v'hillel karebi svirle yer mishvius l'shametes milva bizman hazeh derabbanan hu. That only nowadays, because Shemitah in itself is a din derabbanan. V'yavagav the Hillel by Sheni Havi. What do you mean? Hillel lived in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Sfir le'abayid b'bayis Sheni hoyav lo haya yoivel noyeg l'nogu shmitin b'daraisa. So even if he lived in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, which Hillel did, nonetheless, because he lived in a time which yoivel was not noyeg, which I have to understand why, but the Gemara Erchin discusses that there is no yoivel. That's it. So therefore, because of that, there's no din shmit either. There's no yovel. There's no deraisa shmit either. If you look at the very bottom of this Rashi, this is Abul Teres Kohanim or Isi the Shvius Noig Bizman She'ein Yovel Noig Mi'amrani Shehu Machloikas. Okay. So back to the Gemara. Rabbi, Tisani Rabbi Yomer V'Zedavar Shmita Shmot Shamoit. So it says Shmita twice. So B'Shtei Shmitas Akos Madaber. There's a link. Achas Shmitas Kark V'Achas Shmitas Ksofim. There's a connection between the land and the money. Bisman shata mishamit karka, mishamit ksofim. Time that you're obligated to do shmitas karka, you have to do shmitas ksofim. However, bisman she'iyata mishamit karka, iyata mishamit ksofim. When do you not have to do that? Says Rashi, achshav shabata kedushas aretz. So according to him, there's bata kedushas aretz. There's no din deraisa of shmita. So it doesn't mean it's not a din derabana, but deraisa there's no chiyuv of shmitas karka. So because of there's no shmitas karka, there's no shmitas ksafim. B'yafal pi says Rashi, she'ashemetas ksafim chayvus agopi. It's really on your body. It's a chayv. It's not chayvus karka, which is totally ba'aretz, as the Gemara in Kedushin discusses. Since it's a chayv on chayvus aguf, like tefillin l'mashal, it's noig b'chutzarts, and therefore when it comes to shmitas ksafim, it's tuli b'chutzarts. But again, through this hekesh, we say that since there's no shmitas karka, there's no shmitas ksafim. That's the drasha. So since now we understand it's only din derabbanan, as we continue to lamed vav amud beis, we can now understand v'skinu rabbanan t'tishtamit zeichel shvius. So the rabbanan said zeichel shvius, there's still going to be a din shmitas ksafim. B'zman hazeh. Hillel shenimnu ha'amil havoy said people stopped lending. So maybe he's can prosbul. So he was able to institute this prosbul. So Rabbiya shevel tasahu. So what does this mean? Says Rashi, v'nimsa haloy v'gazlan al pihem. You're really stealing. It's a din deraisa, right? Because the loiva is supposed to pay this guy back, right? So he can pay him back he has to pay him back through the prusbul. But without the prusbul, the din is that he wouldn't have to pay him back. So Gemara says sheval tasa, but haloiva hazeh shav. This borrower is just sitting. Ubatal the eno oisa mitzvah. He's not paying back the loan. So, and etc. So the idea, I believe what it's saying, is that really there's no din shmita at all. So the question is, so how can we say that the love so therefore, the Shemitah doesn't apply at all midoraisa. It's only the Rabbanan. But why would the Rabbanan institute any chiyuv of having to give out a loan anyway? L'zecher shvius. The reality is that this loiva shouldn't have to pay back. Now all of a sudden, now the loiva does have to pay back. So again, so we're saying it's sheval tas. There's a couple ways to read it, but that's maybe one shot. So Rava Oimer hefker based on Hoya hefker. So this is a second answer as to how could Hillel have instituted this takana if in fact this is something which is a din deraisa. The answer is when it comes to dini mominus, as we've seen in many places, the chachamim and the beis din have the right to be able to step in regardless. Says Rashi, really the whole din is deraisa, shmitas ksafim, but tikkun hill shol tishtamit. So how is he able to do such a thing? Again, because hefker best and hefker, the chachamim have the ability to do so. when it comes to monetary issues. How do we see the Rabbanan have such authority? The Beis Din has such authority. Rabbi Yitzchak, and this we've had before. Menayin lo hefker Beis Din hoya hefker shnemer v'chol asher lo yavo lo shloishes yamim. And it didn't come with those 3 days. Ka'atzas hasarim b'hazakenim. Like the eitzah, the advice of these sarim, these leaders and elders. Yacharam kol rechushai. They'll be liquidated, all of their possessions. V'yibadel mikahal hagoyla. And they will be separated from the from this nation. So Rabbi Eliezer, so therefore we see that Yacharam kol rechushai. The pasuk says beferish, says Rashi, Anshe Knesset Gadoluksit. The men of the Great Assembly have the authority to be able to remove money from them. Rabbi Eliezer Mahacha from Sefer Yoshua. El hanachalois asher nachalo Elazar Kohen v'Hoshea ben Nun b'Rashi Avos v'Gomer. So it discusses the division of the land of Eretz Canaan. V'chima inyin Rashi Meitzel Avos. What is the connection between these leaders, like a part of a Beis Din, and our Avos? Ma Avos. When it comes to fathers in general, they cause their children to inherit lands, or kol mashiyirtzu, whatever they want. Basically, they can give to their children whatever they want within reason. So afrashim anchilin kol mashiyirtzu. So to the Rushim, the heads, the leaders, namely the Beis Din, also has the same authority, if you will. They have the same ability to be able to do that. Says Rashi, mechalok nechosim al piv. They divide up their properties based on their mouth. Iboilhu. Ki hiskin hil prusbol wadarihu detikin odilma didari almanami talkin. Now this was a takana that was made. The question is this takana a one-time thing? Or was it something that when he made this takana, it should last for all generations? So what's the difference? Just continue doing it. So on this, the Gemara says, the whole nafkamina is, can a Beis Din come and have it removed? That it was just for his generation, so they can come in and step in and mavatal it. Because Hillel really, so even if we're doing it, but Hillel's takana was really only for that time, that one generation, because again, it's telling him he saw people weren't lending. So maybe that was the whole reason, just for that generation. But a future generation, even though we have the prusbul, maybe the next, another Beis Din can say, okay, the whole takana really shouldn't apply anymore. El iyam lidari almanami talkin. If let's say it's for future generations, Hill said he made this takana for all future generations. We know, as it's brought down in many places, Megillah to begin, ha'ein Beis Din yachol vatal divri Beis Din lechaveroi. You can't remove a takana from a previous Beis Din, takana from before, unless you're greater in wisdom and in minyan in number. And to be able to stand up and to say that you're greater than Hillel is not a statement that you should be very comfortable to make. So what's the din? So Tashma, Yom Shmuel, Lu Kasvinan Pruzbul, Ela Bebeidina Detsura. Says that the prusbul was only written for the like a Beis Din of Surah and the Beis Din of Arda. Now with Dari Alma Nami talking, if it's all future generations, so Bishar Beidin and Nami Lichtavu. So it should be for all generations and all other based but they did them too. So it must be a raya that's only for this one generation. Whereas it's not necessarily. Dilma Kitak and Hillel with Dari Alma. Really, he was masakin it for all future generations, but Kagon Beidina Didei regarding his own Beis Din. Ukarav Ami Karav Asi, the Alim Milaf Kuyim Moina. But for everyone else, no. So if we look in Rashi, Beidina Narda. Shmuel Dechiyam Shmuel Hach Milsabachi Itchil Hach Shialta Bebemid Rasha. When he was asked this question, Habi Bidina the Rav Ami Rav Asi, V'hainu the Mishani Dilma Ki Tikun Hillel Nami L'Dari Alma Lo Tikun El Kigain Bidina the Rav Ami Rav Asi. Right? So again, we're saying, well, maybe he was masakin it for the Beis Din of Rav Ami and Ravash. Tashma dir mishmoel ha prusboila. This particular prusbol ul bana de dainihu. It's a little bit of a chutzpah regarding this whole notion. That's what Rashi says, lashon chutzpah. It's a little bit of brazenness. This whole notion of instituting this prusbol. In the fact is, Yashir Chayil, that if I had the authority of Ataline, I would actually be Mavatalit, and I would get rid of Hillel's Takanim. What am I supposed to do? I'm not as great as Hillel, I can't do it. I behind based in Yachal Avata, based in Chavera Elim, King Godahim and Bachachva Minyan. So it must have been, so what do we see? The fact that he even said the statement, so it must have been only for Hillel's generation. No hachagamar. It just means that if I would have been greater than Hillel, I'd have been mavatal, but it's not a raya either way. Okay. Rav Nachman Omer Akaimeni. I would actually sustain the takana. I would keep it. Akmine. What do you mean? It's already established, right? What do you mean? Oh, I would make sure it's sustained. What do you mean sustained? If it's for all future generations, what are you saying? Of course, it's going to be around because it's around. It's Hillel instituted for all future generations. It must be that really Hillel only did it for his generation. That's why you're making the statement. No. Hachkamer. Ema bein milsa, diafagav dolo kosav kikosav dami. I'll say you something that even if someone didn't even write the prusbul, I would consider it like as though it was actually written. Now that I think the prusbul is so important that even if a guy forgot to write a prusbul, I would still say that you should still get the credit as though you wrote a prusbul, in that the din will be that you will still be able to collect your loans. So we don't really answer this question. Hi ulbana, which we said is like a language of chutzpah, lishna de chutzpahu, o lishna de nichusahu. So question is exactly what does it mean? So aluba, Rashi again says it's chatzufa, or is it a language of nichusa, of convenience? Says Rashi, lenachas hadayonim shol yatrichu lahagvois milvehim lifnei shvius. It's just to not trouble them to collect the loans before shvius. So is it a chutzpah, or is it just making it more convenient? What does that word mean? Tashma diyarma ula aluba kalwa shezinsa b'kerev chupasa. Such brazenness is a kalwa who's mazana, basically right in front of her chuppah. It says Rashi, "Ba'od shchina b'Yisrael b'Sinai." While we were at Har Sinai, also as egel, we did the ched egel. Shari lo nasu m'Sinai adu achar hakamas hamishkan b'shana shniya. It's not considered to be a full marriage until after we actually had the hakamas hamishkan, the enactment and the erection of the mishkan in the second year. So we clearly say that aluva is a language of chutzpah. And chutzpah, just like a kalwa, b'kerev chupasa, right by her chuppah, she was mezana, so to us. With Egel Hazav, oimerav mari baradaba shmuel mikra. What is the pasuk? Says Rashi, Diesh lider shleim kalwa mezana b'chupasa. So it says, Ad shehamelech b'mesiboi nirdi nasan reichai. That while the king was still engaged in his sort of Rashi b'chupasai, his chuppah, there was aroma that left this smell. It says Rashi, boismi azav reichai hatoiv, that there was this, it was forsaken, this smell from reich hatoiv. So there was a good smell, and then that smell went afoul. Omarab adayin chavivusa hu gabon. I still love this other. Says Rashi, Avni shehisker kilulehen. Even though you mentioned the curse, hisker ella b'maras chiba. It was said with like love. V'luksiv hitzriach. Nasan v'luksiv hitzriach. So it doesn't say got spoiled. So even though it was a terrible thing that we did, but the language was softer in the response. Tanurban. Hane'elavim ve'enu oilbin, someone who is affronted by others, but yet they do not respond, they don't react toward the way that they were mistreated. Shaimin cherpasan bin meshivin. We hear their shame, and he hears shame and does not respond. Or someone who engages with love and is joyful, and even the anguish that he has. And those who are loved could say Hashem is like the sun going down in its strength. So again, we see this notion of oyulvin, which is really a language of chutzpah or disrespect or mistreatment, and therefore that's the language, and therefore it's referring to specifically that, and that's the notion of maybe a prismal represents that element of chutzpah. But the reality is that this is what Hillel was masakin in order to avoid people from withholding, giving out loans. Ad kan.